late. So we're going to start slowly, and everybody else is going to join us. Bezrat Hashem. So this week is not only a Parsha, or the Parsha of the week, it is also actually the conclusion and the completion of an entire Chumash, the book of Bereshit. I can sometimes it's hard to believe we were just starting reading Bereshit, just at Simchas Torah. There was so much fun, a new beginning, and there we're already finishing the whole book. 4 more books left to go, but it was a good Chumash, and I'm sure that we learned a lot of good stuff in general, and especially in our classes that we have the opportunity to learn every Wednesday. So we will continue Bezrat Hashem. The last words that you say when you finish a parsha is Chazak Chazak Benit Chazek, which means be strong and we will be even stronger. So we are strong that we accomplished to learn Bereshis, and we're going to get even stronger in the next books. So this week's Parshas Vayechi, the name of the parsha, has obviously a lot of different information, but mainly, and the irony is that the name of the parsha is called Vayechi, but Vayechi means he was alive, and yet the main discussion of the parsha is not about Yaakov's life, but rather about the end of Yaakov's life. And the Torah begins that Yaakov lived 17 years in the land of Egypt. These 17 years apparently was the choicest and the best years of Yaakov's life, where he was reunited with his son, Yosef, and united with the entire family, not at home in Israel, but at least they were united. And he was able to see what they call in Yiddish, nachas. He was able to see the joy and pleasure of the family continuing in the same direction that he raised them. And as the Medrash points out very clearly, that Yaakov had something that not even his father or grandfather merited to see, because his father, Isaac, had a wonderful son called Yaakov, but he also had never to deal with a case called Esau. The grandfather, Avraham, also had a wonderful son called Yitzchak, but he had to deal with another son called Ishmael. It was only Yaakov that he merited to see his entire family, all 12 children, despite the challenges what obviously he went through, but all the children were following in the same direction, in the same traditions, in the same way of life that he was teaching them and he was directing them and he was educating them. So for Yaakov, it was a tremendous pleasure. And that's perhaps what the Torah tells us, Vayechi Yaakov, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, that for Yaakov, that was the real symbol of life, to see his children after all the years and close to his last years of life, his whole family is united and living a lifestyle which he had brought them up to and he had anticipated them to live. So for Yaakov, it was a tremendous quality of life, to the point there's a commentary on the Chumash called the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim writes that the numerical value of the 17 years which Yaakov lived in Egypt, the numerical value for the number 17 in Hebrew is the word Tov. Tov means good. The letter Tet makes up the number 9. The letter Vav makes up the number 6. and the letter Bet makes up the number 2. So 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 2 is 17, because it's tough. There was really good years for Yaakov. But later, before he dies, the Torah goes on with a long discussion how he invited his children to share with each one a message about life, a message about their personalities. And again, you see the beauty of a family, that no one is expected to be the same as the other. 12 kids, 12 different personalities. Each one is being mentioned with his own name. Each one is being given his own bracha, his own blessing, and that's how Yaakov is looking at them and teaching them and directing them and informing them about their future, discussing with some their past, and basically able to say nicely goodbye to each one of those children. And the Torah will conclude this week's Parsha with the passing of Yaakov and the major respected funeral Jacob had, his request to be only buried in Israel, in the same place where his ancestors are buried, in Hebron, which his request was obviously respected, mainly spearheaded and led by his son Yosef, which he was in charge in Egypt, and he was able to direct them properly and to give them and to let his father get the proper respect that the father deserved, to be taken to Israel. Not only the Jewish people were participating on the funeral, the Torah goes on and describes what kind of amazing respect that was given from the Egyptians and from the people around, to the point that, as the Medrash describes, that the coffin in which Yaakov was carried, every king of the surrounding cities or countries was actually placing their crown, removing the crown of their head and placing it on the casket to show the special kavod, the special honor they're giving to Jacob. That is alluded in the verse when it says, Vayovoyu ad goyreno otod. They came to the threshing floor with its thorns. And the commentaries, Rashi is trying to explain, it's also in the Talmud, in the Gemara, what kind of place is it called Goren? Goren in Hebrew means a threshing floor for the wheat and the grain. Otod is thorns. And what is the relationship to Yaakov's coffin? So the Medrash tells us, the Talmud tells us actually, that just like when you have a threshing floor and you prepare the grain there for usage, so you surround it with a circle of thorns, making sure that people, strangers, don't come around and abuse it or damage it, and you want to make sure that it's protected. So that circle of protection is like a circle which is representing the crowns of which Yaakov's coffin was also honored by each and every one of the nearby neighbors and the princes or the queens, kings, whatever title they had. They all made sure to share their crown and to give up their crown and place it on the casket to give that special kavod. And then the Torah continues that what happens when they come back from the funeral and the brothers of Yosef are realizing that the father is not around anymore, so maybe is now Yosef going to revenge them for what they did to him 17 all the years earlier. And they went and discussed it, and Yosef again ensured them that I'm not going to cause you any trouble because you did not wrong me, he actually says. Whatever happened, he uses the powerful words, that you might have think that it's something bad, but Elohim Chashava L'Toivo, God was the one who had in mind that this is going to be a source of benefit and only goodness, and therefore nothing bad is going to happen to you. And the Torah goes on with Yosef's life until the end of the story is that Yosef is also passing away in Egypt, and he's being kept there for the many years that the Jewish people are going to stay there until next week, when we're going to go through the book of Shemot. We're only going to have Yosef leaving Egypt together with when at the time when we are living, because he was promised and he actually took an oath that he's not going to be left in Egypt alone. He's going to be brought to Israel. He was eventually brought. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who carried them, and it was Yeshua ben Nun who actually brought them in and buried them. Till today, they have the tomb of Yosef, known in the city of Shechem, which is the burial place of Yosef. And this is the synopsis of the Parsha. It's not a long Parsha, but this is the last Parsha that we are discussing in the book of Bereshis. Now, what I would like to discuss tonight is a story which takes place in this week's Parsha. And this is not about Yaakov and his sons, but rather about Yaakov and his grandsons, his grandchildren. And I'm talking specifically about the two sons of Yosef, which is Menashe and Ephraim. What the Torah tells us regarding Menashe and Ephraim is that Yosef was informed that his father is actually ill, he's got sick, and he realized that it's time to come and to pay a special visit with his children. So he's going to be able to see his father, and his grandchildren are going to be able to receive a special blessing from their Zaidi, from their grandfather Yaakov. When he comes over there to the house of Yaakov in Goshen, the place that we discussed last week, Yaakov actually gets very inspired by seeing these beautiful children, and he actually tells his son that God promised me an addition to the family, which I means probably to say is that I am going to get more than the 12 tribes. And he gives them the gift of an additional tribe by taking and elevating Menashe and Ephraim to the status of the Shvatim, to the status of the tribes. And that's what is later became to known as Shevet Menashe and Shevet Ephraim. So that gift is presenting to Yosef by telling him, listen, your children are going to be considered like one of the boys, not just as grandchildren, but as children and as part of the Shvatim. And then Yosef is positioning his children to receive a bracha from the grandfather. So the Torah tells us that the way Yosef positioned them was, since Yaakov was sitting on his bed when he welcomed them to the house, so Yosef stood standing facing Yaakov, placed Menashe to his left, which means that he is going to be facing the right side of the father Yaakov, who is sitting facing him. And he put Ephraim, the younger son, on his right. So when he's on his right, he's going to be now facing the left side of Yaakov, who is sitting on his bed. Because if you face someone against you, someone is facing you, so your right is against his left, and your left is against his right. What was Yosef's intention? obviously, since Menashe was the Bechor, Menashe was the firstborn, so the firstborn deserves to get the stronger blessing. The stronger blessing is represented with the stronger hand, which is the hand of the right. So that's why Yosef, facing his father, puts Menashe on his left, facing Yaakov's right hand. So he can directly, like I'm showing you here, put his right hand over Menashe, who is facing him, and then his left hand over Ephraim, who is facing him on his left. And lo and behold, the Torah tells us Yaakov creatively switches the hand. He puts his hand across each other, which he ends up putting his right hand on the left child against him, which is the younger child, Ephraim, and his left hand is now over the right side, which is the eldest son called Menashe. And he actually gives them a bracha. He gives them a blessing. Amalach hagoel loisi mikol ra, the angel who redeemed me from all bad. Yevorech es haneorim, should bless this lad. Veikorim bohem shmi v'shem avoisai, and the name of me and my ancestors should be called over them. V'yidgu loroiv bekerev ha'oretz, and they should be increased as fish in the midst of the earth. What is the special mentioning of fish? So Rashi tells us because fish multiply more than any other creatures, and the reason also to do also with the fact that the fish are living underwater, so they are not affected by the so-called ayin hara, the evil eye, which is a topic for itself, and therefore they multiply. And Yaakov gave his grandchildren the blessing that they are not going to be impacted by no jealousy, no evil eye, and therefore they will enhance and increase and grow into this major, beautiful families. After that blessing, the Torah tells us that Yosef is getting upset. What's going on? The father is putting Ephraim by giving his right hand on the youngest Ephraim. He specially organized their position in such a way that Menashe should be given the right hand. And look, the father made a change. He gets upset. He doesn't like it. And as the Torah says, he even lifts his father's hands up from Ephraim's head. And while he's lifting it up, he kind of tells his father, not kind of, he actually tells his father that Loichen, ki Menashe b'chor. You have to put your right on Menashe. He's the firstborn. And the father tells him, Yodati b'ni Yodati. He repeats the word Yodati twice. I know everything. I know. And what is the double knowing? Nachmanides in other commentaries say that first of all he says, I know what I'm doing. Okay? Yaakov was old and his eyes were heavy of sight. So Yosef thought maybe the father was confusing things. So he tells them, first of all, Yodati. I know that you position them on this way you position them, and I know exactly that I moved my hands around. And the reason is because I know something about Ephraim and Menashe, that I feel that Ephraim needs the stronger hand, and Menashe is going to be satisfied with the weaker hand as well. Yodaiti, he tells them, the Yodaiti, I know that Menashe is going to have a lot of brachas, and he's going to be all right, and he's going to have the famous story of Gidon. With his success, Gidon is a descendant of Menashe. He's going to be very, very much successful, but Ephraim is going to need a bigger blessing because Ephraim mainly is going to have his grandson called Yeshua, who is going to lead the Jewish people into the land. He's going to conquer the land. and therefore he needs a bigger blessing than that, and that's what the right hand is being given to Ephraim. Take the next right onto North. So the very obvious question that commentators are also dealing with: what happened between blessing number 1 and blessing number 2? If Yosef feels that placing the right hand on the youngest child is an issue, is a problem, so before the father is even starting the first blessing, Yesimcha Lakimke, Amalach Hagoy Eloisi, you should have right away stopped him and say that it's not right. Their hands are placed wrongly. But the Torah only tells us that it happened after he gave the first blessing. It happened later. So the question is, why didn't he try to help his father immediately when it happened? This is question number 1. And some commentaries do actually say that what he told his father was right from the beginning, before he started the first blessing, but the Torah wanted to write the blessing right after the story of the placing of the hand, at least the first blessing. But there are commentators which clearly say no, that the words of Yosef came out only after the first bracha. And they explain it as follows. They explain that what happened was that when Yosef saw it happening, he thought, you know what? Maybe my father has something in mind, that he feels that Ephraim needs something his right hand, and then he's going to give an extra blessing for my oldest son, Menashe. Turn right onto East Nisbet Road. But then when he saw that the father actually gave the same blessing to both, he told them, Amalach Hagoy Eloisi, Yevorech es haneorim, should bless this young lad. So he's not giving anything or anyone more than he gives the other. So if you're giving the same blessing to both of them, then he was wondering, so what is it? Why is it that you gave your hand on Ephraim? You're giving him the same bracha, you're giving him the same blessing. So what's the point of giving him and rearranging the hands of the children? This is what some commentaries explain, is why that complaint of Yosef only came after that the son, after he gave the first brach. But there's a very beautiful insight which is given by the Rabbi. Here I'm just walking out of the car. I'm not going to lose you. Just give me 1 minute. There's a very beautiful insight given by the Rabbi. Give me a second. Just a second. You're going to hear me more comfortably once I'm coming in here to this house. Yep, thank you. So this is what the Rebbe says. What the Rebbe says is that when the Rebbe asked a very strong question, a beautiful question. The Rebbe says, doesn't make any sense. Even though Yosef felt that the blessing should go to Menashe because he's the right, but after all, your father is already putting his hand on Ephraim, right? Why are you taking off the hand? Why are you taking off the hand?
Немножко подожди.
Why are you taking off the hand? Алло.
Положи, я здесь сижу спокойно. Никуда отходить не собираюсь.
Алло.
Исахар, понял?
Rabbi
Асхара слышу.
Алло.
Как?
Okay.
Сейчас не выйдет.
How do I mute
Я
them?
ничего не делаю.
Let's see if I can mute them myself. Anyway. So, you hear me? So the Rebbe says that the question that the Rebbe asked, why if you see already that the hand is on the left, on Ephraim, why are you taking it off? The Torah says he lifted up, and he can support it to remove his father's hand from Ephraim. What's the idea there? So the Rebbe says something very, very important and very, very original. You know what he says? Listen to that. Yosef, when he sees his father putting his hand on the young child, the right hand, the stronger hand, he obviously knows what it means to give attention to the young child and what kind of impact it has on the family, because he went through that experience. He was the young child, and his father showed him favoritism. He made him a colorful coat, right? He gave him special attention, and that created a jealousy between the brothers. He ended up in the pit. He ended up in jail. He ended up in Egypt. Yes, thank God. It all worked out in the end, but it was many years of suffering, many years of challenges, all because the young child was given attention. So Yosef does not like what he sees. He does not want to see another story of showing favoritism to a younger child and creating another story in his own family. That's why he tried to stop it. But what happened to Yaakov? The Rebbe says beautifully. Yaakov, till this point, and actually throughout his life, he never knew the real story, what happened to his son Yosef. The tribes never told him the story. And Yosef himself also was very careful not to tell his father nothing about what happened. To the point, there are early commentators like the Dat, Skeni, Balatosphos, and others, they say that Yosef actually made sure all these years in Egypt, 17 years, he never went to see his father except the first time when they met, and now when he came to get the blessing. How can you stay away from your father after all the years and finally you meet up with them? Why are you staying away? Yes, he was a very busy man and he was running the country, but still, you're finally meeting up with your father in the same country. Why aren't you going to see him? You know what the commentators tell us? Yosef was very afraid to meet his father, so his father should not ask him, what happened to you? How did you end up in Egypt? And at some point, he's going to have to give out the secret that it was your sons who got me here. So not to speak what they call Lashon Hara, not to speak badly about the brothers, Yaakov's kids, so he kept in secret all the years, 17 years, did not tell his father nothing, to the point that he didn't even go to visit his father to ensure that that question does not come up. So now, Yaakov, you have to look at him. When he is placing his right hand on the youngest son, Ephraim, for Yaakov, this is a given. He thinks, in his mind, there was a success with Joseph. I gave him a colorful coat. He had his dreams that they're all going to bow down. And look, it's working out. He is the ruler of Egypt. Everybody came down here. He's running the country. He's providing for all of us. Not knowing that there was anything wrong, it was perfect for him. In his mind, in his perspective, to end up giving a bracha to the younger son over the oldest. But Yosef, who knows the truth and what happened to him personally, obviously he's trying each way to remove the hand of his father's hand from Ephraim and trying to put it over Menashe, only when his father explains him that yes, Menashe is the older one, but Ephraim needs the bigger blessing, then is when Yosef submits and he allows the procedure to continue and the blessings is being given to them. So clearly, what we see in this Parsha, in this story, that first of all, that there is an important concept of placing your hand when you give a blessing over somebody. So the placing of the hand represents that you are kind of fastening, you kind of confirming the bracha, right? You're strengthening the blessing. That's why also by the priests, the Kohanim, when they give a blessing, they also lift up their hand. The commentaries tell us that really the hand was supposed to be, on each Kohen was supposed to be a hand. I'm sorry, on each member of the community which receives the blessing from the Kohen should have put his hand over that individual. But you can't expect when you have a big congregation that the Kohen is going to put his hand on every member of the community. So therefore, what do? The Kohen lifts up his hand and kind of hovers the entire congregation by sharing the priestly blessing, Birkat Kohanim. But also when Moshe appointed Yoshua as his successor, it says in the Torah, Vayismoich Moshe es Yodov. Moshe placed his hands over his head, and that kind of represented the transition and the transforming from his own strength to Yeshua ben Nun. That's what we call actually in Torah smicha. Smicha means leaning, like when you appoint another rabbi to be your successor or to continue the legacy. It's called giving him smicha, because the original smicha was not just a diploma that you passed the test and you're okay to be a rabbi. It was actually placing the hands of the giver on the receiver, and by that kind of representing that I am transmitting from my strength and from my powers to you as my successor to carry my legacy. That's what's called smicha. And the right hand is the stronger hand. And the right hand, when you place your right hand over the next person who you provide that blessing, you're obviously showing in a symbolic manner, but it's more than just a symbolic manner. You're actually kind of connecting to that person facing you with the extra powers that you provide them with this bracha. And that's what Yaakov felt. Ephraim is going to need more. Ephraim, after all, like I said earlier, Rashi brings, Ephraim is going to be in charge of conquering the land of Israel. Moses got to steal the land, but there was Ephraim's grandson, Yeshua ben Nun, who had to conquer and lead the wars with the various nations who were in the land of Israel. And it was a lot of work. It was a very big job. He needed the right hand. He needed Yaakov's right hand. And Yeshua was standing on Yaakov's right side, true, but the left hand was kind of enough to provide him this blessing. Now I want to move this idea and talk about more in the relationship that we have with God, to see if there is also this concept of right and left, and perhaps this Menashe and Ephraim kind of scenario. So, just like if Menashe and Ephraim are positioning themselves before Jacob, every time you pray, you're also positioning yourself in front of God. That's what prayer is. Kemekabel pnei shchina, as the Shulchan Aruch says, as you are receiving the presence of Shechina, the presence of God. The leading prayer in Judaism is the prayer of Amidah. Amidah means standing. It's when you stand up after you introduced the Psalms and verse of praise, and you even said the Shema, and you spoke about the angels and all the goodies. Then is when you have a personal encounter between you and God, and you stand and you say the words quietly, silently, because it's like you're talking to God here. Nobody else needs to hear you. This is the prayer of Amida, known as the 19 blessings, or Shmona Esrei. What happens at the end of Amida, the last verse reads, Oseh Shalom Mimronav, Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. The one who makes peace in heavens, you ask God, shall also bring peace on us and on the entire Israel, and say Amen. The Talmud tells us that when you say that last verse at the conclusion of Amida, you take 3 steps going backwards from where you were standing during the prayer, and then you turn your face towards your left, and then you turn your face to your right, and then you bow in the middle. The way you go, you say, Oseh Shalom Mimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. To the left, to the right, and to the center. And the Talmud tells us, this is Talmud in Tractate Brachot. Why is it that you turn your face to your left first and then to your right? Wouldn't it make more sense to start with the right and then to the left? The right is more important than left in many ways, but right? You should place your head to the right first. Why is it that you're now to the left first? So the Talmud tells us, because you are facing God. And when you face somebody, your left is his right. So you're giving your head first to the right side of God. Therefore, you turn it to the left, because God is again facing you. And then you turn it to the right, which is the left side of God. That's how you say Oseh Shalom. This is codified in Jewish law and tradition, that this is what we do in the end of prayer. Left, right, and center. Now, we all understand that the right of God is also the dominating side, like the verse tells us by the Song of the Sea, Yemincha Hashem ledari b'koach, Yemincha Hashem tir'atz oyev. It is your right hand which is beautified with strength, and it is your right hand which crushed the enemy. In Tehillim, we have the famous verse, Yemin Hashem romema, Yemin Hashem osachayil. The right side of God is superior and uplifted. It is the right side of God which makes and presents strength. So we all know that right is the strong side. Even when we talk about God, with God is no image, but in the metaphor of relating to God, God has his stronger revelation represented by the right, and the so-called less strong revelation represented by the left. So when we are positioning ourselves in prayer, which side of us, of the human being facing God, needs the extra blessing, the so-called the extra strength of God's protection? So those who learn Tanya, these week's daily classes, know that the Tanya talks about the 2 souls, the godly soul and the animal soul. And the Alter Rebbe in Tanya also introduces their locations. And he tells us that the animal soul is positioned on the left side of the body, the left side of the heart. That's where the desires come, the passion, the interests in worldly manners, in the need to provide for myself and to build my selfish image, that is represented by the left. That's for the evil inclination is taking residence. The right side is where the godly soul is dwelling. And those who want to study it, you can study it in chapter 9 in Tanya. You're going to see the right and the left with a whole geographic description. Why is he in the right now? Why is he in the left? And exactly how it works out. But this is what he says. So this obviously gives us an understanding that being that the left is where the animal soul is, that needs God's right side to support, right? That needs the stronger side, the stronger revelation. And the right side of us, which is the godly soul, also needs God's help, because the godly soul, first of all, can also, God forbid, not be utilized properly, and it can be abused too. The right side also needs help. Everybody needs protection. But when it comes the end of prayer, so then when we are positioning ourselves before God, so think on this image of Menashe and Ephraim. Our right side, the firstborn, the so-called the developed, the godly soul, is placed on the right side of Jacob, which is sitting or facing us, and Ephraim is positioned on the left. And yet, what does Jacob do? He says, no, no, no. I'm giving my right side to the younger one, to the one who is on my left. So for us, it works out perfectly because our left happens to be facing the right of God. So God doesn't have to switch anything around. It is perfectly positioned that his right is facing our left, and our left needs his right. It is our right, Menashe, the godly soul, which needs him too, but it's enough when he provides us and protects us with his left. But we both need help. And therefore, when you finish prayer, what do? We turn to the left, which is the right of God, with two care on our left, and then we turn to the right, which is the right side of God, with two care on our right. But Baruch Hashem, we are organizing ourselves after the story of Menashe and Ephraim. We know already how to be organized enough that our left should be facing the right, and our right should be facing the left, because the left needs the right of the giver, of the one who blesses us. So this is what you should remember when you say Amida next time, and you finish Oseh Shalom. Actually, the Rabbi used to say the first three words, already making those motions. The Rebbe used to go, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. In the Talmud, it says you should say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Israel. What the Rebbe used to do in the first three words of Oseh Shalom, moving to the left, to the right, and to the center. There's an interesting story that somebody shared, that he was at a private audience by the Rebbe. And when he was there in the private audience, the Rebbe asked him a question. The question was, how comes such an important organ, maybe the most important organ of a person's body, not talking about the brain, this is the head, but in the organization of the body, the most important organ is obviously the heart. The Rebbe asked them, how comes that the heart is positioned in place in the left side of a person? Such a significant organ, shouldn't it be respected by placing it in the right? Why is it in the left? You know, everything as the statement goes, location, 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 right? So I guess for the Rebbe it was important to see that something as important as the heart should be also giving a nicer location in the body, And the right is always nicer than the left. It's always more important, more significant. So how comes the heart ended up on the left side of the body? So obviously, when you get a question like this from the Rebbe, you have to have enough seichel, enough wisdom to shut up and not to respond so you can hear the Rebbe's response, right? It's not a question that you should come up with ideas. And this guy was smart to be quiet. And actually, the Rebbe told him the answer. And listen to what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe tells this man, his name is Moshe Tzur, he lives in Jerusalem today. The Rebbe tells him like this: you have to look at yourself standing facing somebody else. What is the most important purpose of the heart? To love somebody, to share with somebody, to have feelings towards somebody. So when you're looking on somebody with your heart, which part of that somebody are you facing when your heart is in the left? You're facing that person's right. Since the heart is all about the other person, so your heart is in the right side because it's right. That's who you are interacting with. That's what you are there for. You are to be for the other person. And for the other person, you are in his right because you're facing him. And your left becomes his right. Isn't that beautiful? There's a famous story of the previous Rebbe writes it in a letter. He talks about different Hasidim, and he describes this great Hasid of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman, which his name was Yekutiel Lepler. He came from a city called Lepel. Lepel, a city in Russia, I guess, in Belarus. They called them Kushe Lepler. Yekutiel was Kushe Lepler. And he wasn't originally a Hasid, like most Hasidim were not originally Hasidim. I mean, the Alter Rebbe was a new development in the world of Jewish philosophy and thought, and he joined. Before he met the Alter Rebbe, in those days, people, before they met the Alter Rebbe, they used to study a lot and prepare themselves. That was already the so-called the peak of your development is when you came to see the Rebbe. But this Kusha Lepler was a very heartwarming person, very excited about the things he learned, and he heard these teachings of the Alter Rebbe. He was so excited that he felt he is ready to see the Alter Rebbe by now. He wants to have a private audience. And the Chassid told him, it doesn't work like this. You have to prepare yourself. Your turn is going to come. But he had no patience, and he was too excited, and he was very fired up. So he climbed up on the roof, and from the roof he jumped to the window, and he ended up in the Alter Rebbe's private room. And he said the following words. The previous Rebbe writes it in Yiddish. He says, Rebbe, ak mir up the linke Seite, which means, Rebbe, please remove my left side from me. I can't deal with that. The left side representing the evil inclination, the animal soul. He said, just cut it off, deamputate it. I don't want it. And the Alter Rebbe responded to him with the verse, which it says we said in the morning prayers, Ve'ato mechayes kulam. That you, Almighty God, you sustain them all. You provide energy to all of them. And by that, the Alter Rebbe energized his left side too, and he gave him the ability to realize that you don't have to cut it off. You have to be able to transform it and to utilize the energies of the left in also being directed into the service of God, into the service of a man's obligation to God. You don't have to get rid of the left. You have to change the left. You have to direct it because there's a lot of energy into the left. And this is exactly what Yaakov is telling his son Yosef. Ephraim needs to be where he is, because there's something also that the commentaries are pointing out, something interesting. When Yaakov is sitting on his bedside, and he realizes that Menashe is on his right side, meaning on his left, which he will get the right hand, and Ephraim is on his right, which means he's going to get the left hand, and he doesn't want to give him that blessing. He wants to change it. Why doesn't he just take the boys and change their position? Pick up Ephraim, move him to the right, take Menashe, pull him to the left, and then you're going to end up having your right hand straight over Ephraim and your left hand straight over Menashe. Instead, he switches his hands, right? So the commentators are discussing it. Some say actually he didn't want to embarrass the children by trying to switching them around, you know. You come here, and he didn't want to interfere in that area. But based on what we are learning, it's more than that. Ephraim belongs to the left. It's not that Ephraim is going to become less lefty because of the blessing. The idea of the blessing is to utilize the left, to take Ephraim and the type of life Ephraim is involved with. Even his very name, Ephraim, represents to be fruitful in the land of my sorrow. That's why Yosef called him Ephraim. To work with Egypt, to conquer Israel, to conquer Canaan, stay in your area, in your way of life of left, and while you're in your left, get my right hand blessing and energy to overcome it and to succeed in your service. And same thing, Menashe. Menashe doesn't have to become right. Menashe doesn't have to be moved on his left side in order to get the lesser blessing. Menashe can stay who he is and should stay who he is. And he recognized Menashe as the firstborn. But at the same time, to provide him what he needs. And the left hand is what gave Menashe what he needed to become and to stay Menashe, to be a Menashe, and everything, all that Menashe was succeeding in his life. So basically, to summarize the message of this Parsha is to realize, number one, that when you're on your left and you're weak, you have God's right side. So you're not so lost. Don't worry. When you're weaker, you get even stronger love, stronger energy. And when you're on the right side and you don't get the right hand of God, also don't get upset. It's all taken care of everything is planned, everything is programmed. Because if you're on the right, God says, I will support you too. But believe me, it's enough that you get to my left. I can share with my right with those who need my right. And at the same time, also to remember that even our left is somebody else's right. When you stand yourself and you position yourself facing somebody else, so your left is his right, and your right is his left, and same is vice versa. And therefore, we know how to direct the proper attention to each one individually, and at the same time integrating the right and the left to the right, like Yaakov did, placing his hands on both directions, showing that everybody has his own bracha and his own source of blessing and energy for their needs and provided with what they need. Thank you. This is a short message of the Parsha. I hope you can further develop it and think about it. And Bezrat Hashem should be for everybody a good week, a good Shabbos. Apparently, according to the secular calendar, I can tell you we're all going to see each other next year, not only next week, right? For those who the New Year's is a new year. I wish you a happy new year. And for those who are Rosh Hashanah was the new year 3 months ago, they will continue with the Rosh Hashanah energy into the winter, and only good news from Israel. And the new year should bring, for the nations of the world, it's a new year. So obviously, those people who are troublemakers are for sure counting this new year as a new year next week, right? So I hope they make the right resolution and get their hands off for brothers and sisters in Israel, and get their hands off of every Jew in the world. And what it's good for them is going to be good for us, that they should stay where they are, where they are positioned, and let us live our life. And those who God needs to use his right hand to crush them, like he did to Pharaoh and the story of Egypt. So this is a great opportunity to turn to God and pray that they should get crushed sooner than later. So we should be able to continue our life in servicing Hashem with simcha, with joy, and marry the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen. Thank you very much,
Amen.
everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was a beautiful lesson. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome. I'll see you. Come join us. See you on Shabbos, Bezrat Hashem. All the best. Thank you.
Yeah.
יהיה בעל קורא בשבת.